Where is publishing headed in 2025? Has the AI apocalypse arrived? Is this the end of publishing as we know it? We'll find out in this episode of Novel Marketing, the longest running book marketing podcast in the world. In this episode, we're going to look at trends from 2024 and then talk about if those trends are likely to continue, diminish, or accelerate in 2025. And let's start with traditional publishing, where the bloom came off the rose for traditional publishing. Our most listened to episode in 2024 was about the publishing industry secrets that were revealed at the Penguin Random House trial. This is an episode I'm realizing I haven't yet uploaded to YouTube, and if I ever do, I'll add a link to it in this episode. That episode was so popular because the publishing industry tends to hold tightly to its secrets, and it's very rare for people to share those secrets, and even more rare for them to do it under oath in a court of law. But that's exactly what happened at the PRH trial. So here's a few highlights from that episode and from that trial. One was that publishers only spend 2% of their total revenue on marketing. So it's not just you that's not getting marketing, it's nobody who's getting very much marketing. 2% of revenue on marketing is not a lot for a consumer products company. The other, even bigger surprise was that 19% of books published by the big five houses sell a dozen copies or fewer. That's right, 1 out of 5 books fails to sell even 13 copies. The other big realization from that trial was that publishers rarely negotiate on royalty rates, leading many to speculate about market collusion. Now, the judge didn't find collusion, but the judge did underline that this is very suspicious that all ebooks for almost all authors are all at 25%. A lot more dirty laundry got aired at that trial, and I encourage you to listen to the episode if you haven't already. But based off of the listen numbers and the blog post statistics, many of you have already read that episode. So traditional publishers got a lot of mileage out of fancy New York City offices, and that mystique is starting to fade. Many authors now see traditional publishing as the new vanity publishing. It attracts status seekers, while the professional authors, the ones who are looking to make a living from their writing, are opting for indie publishing, where they can make a lot more money. My prediction is that old school traditional publishing will continue to decline in status, but I think the publishing houses will be fine financially, due in part to the strength of their backlists, but also because of the second trend, which is a new publishing model is emerging. Traditional publishers are having a harder and harder time keeping their authors from leaving and going indie. There is a reason why big platform celebrities like Taylor Swift and Dave Ramsey opt to go indie over traditional publishing. Other traditional authors like E.L. James look to go back to indie after selling millions of books traditionally. Why? Well, successful indie authors don't care about most of what traditional publishers offer. They don't care about getting help with covers, typesetting, editing, advertising, their ebooks, and they don't care about large advances. They already do all of this on their own. And if they do want a large advance, they can just put their book on Kickstarter. And when I say successful indies, I'm talking about indie authors who are making 6 or 7 figures per year. An author who's making $50,000 a month is not going to find a $100,000 advance appealing. And historically, traditional publishers have not understood how to attract these kinds of authors. What successful indies do care about are things like creative control over the content of their book, complete ownership of the ebook and all of the ebook revenue, creative control over the presentation of the book. We're talking about the cover, the branding, the Amazon page, etc. They care about sales representation to physical bookstores and buyers at those physical bookstores. They care about distribution into physical bookstores, and they care about real-time access to sales data. Now, there's a new kind of publisher that aims to help indie authors with what successful indies care about. And the two biggest examples of this so far are Bloom Books and Authors Equity. Bloom Books works with already successful indie authors by focusing on print book distribution. Successful indies make most of their money from ebook sales and are often willing to sell their physical rights if they can get actual distribution and sales and placement into physical bookstores. A lot of companies will promise that, but not a lot actually deliver. Not all readers have a Kindle, and not all readers shop on Amazon, and indie authors want access to those kinds of readers. And the Bloom Books model is working. They had 20 books on the New York Times bestseller list last year, and I think that's more than any other imprint from any other publisher. I predict more traditional publishers will launch imprints following the Bloom Books / authors equity model. Corporate America is very good at a technique called fast following, and when they see success, they are quick to copy that success. Now, I want to be really clear here that this model is the opposite of hybrid publishing. Hybrid publishing tends to target that earlier list of things that successful indies don't care about, like typesetting and getting the book placed on Amazon. Successful indies know how to do that. Hybrid publishers like Westbow and Ex Libris prey on authors' ignorance and plunder them for all they are willing to spend. So I'm not a fan of hybrid publishing. This new model is very different from hybrid publishing. And if you want to learn more about hybrid publishing, listen to my episode on the topic. The next trend is the rise in romantasy. Some of the best-selling books of 2024 were romantic fantasies, or romantasy. Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros topped the all-time bestseller list for 2024, and romantasy skyrocketed in both 2023 and 24, and now everyone is jumping on the bandwagon. Will this trend in rising romantasy continue? Well, BookScan indicates that the sales for romantasy are already starting to slow down. Jane Friedman thinks that sales will plateau, and I predict that the sales will stay strong, but I don't think we're going to see any continued growth. So I think this is going to be a genre that will persist, but I don't think you can expect to see the kinds of double-digit growth we've seen in the last couple of years. And certainly not the triple-digit growth that we saw in 23. Another trend in 24 was a rise in premium books. Premium hardback books had a great year. Whether it was Book Vault opening up premium editions to American indie authors, Kickstarter exclusives, or traditional publishers finally embracing premium editions, premium books had a really good year, the best year they've had in decades. In fact, as I prepped this episode, the number one book on all of Amazon was the deluxe limited edition of Onyx Storms. This is a book that's at the confluence of two trends, romantasy and premium books. I predict that this trend will continue in 2025. Premium books are fashionable right now, and a full shelf of premium books behind you on camera is what Gen Z would call a flex, or what baby boomers would call a status symbol. But I don't think this trend will continue forever. Special edition books go in and out of popularity over the years. They were a really popular alternative to pulp paperbacks back in the 1920s. They had another resurgence in, I think, the 1980s or 1990s. They come and they go. And what happens is that once people fill their bookshelf with premium books, they stop being interested in premium books because there's only so much bookshelf space to fill. So I think the cycle will continue going up in 25, but I don't think it'll go up forever. And you can tell when the trend will start shifting by watching Brandon Sanderson. He's currently the king of premium editions, and once his special edition sales start slumping, the rest of the industry will slowly follow over the following years. Premium books won't crash completely, but they'll rather fade in popularity as readers fill their shelves. So, those were the easy predictions and the non-controversial trends. Now let's talk about some of the more controversial trends from 2024. Brace yourselves, and for those of you on YouTube, start writing your angry comments now. So the first trend was that readers stepped to the right in 2024. Amazon has kept an annual overall bestseller list since 1995, and I find this list very interesting for noticing trends in society because, unlike the New York Times bestseller list and most of the other lists that are attached with a newspaper, the Amazon list is not curated by an editorial committee. Everything makes the list if it has the sales to make the list. It's just pure sales data. So you have coloring books and Bibles and novels all competing on the same list. And this list really indicates what readers are moving to. And it indicated that in 2024, they moved to the right. For example, in 2020, the number one book was by Barack Obama. The number two book was the anti-Trump Too Much Is Never Enough. The left-wing extremist book White Fragility came in at number 8, and Michelle Obama came in at number 14, and the anti-Trump book Rage came in at number 17. The rest of the list was peppered with even more left-leaning political books. There were no conservative political books in the top 20, and the only one to make the top 50 was Sean Hannity, who squeaked in at number 46. Now let's compare to 2024. The top political books were J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy at number 4 and Melania at number 17. There were no left-leaning books in the top 50 and no left-leaning books in the top 100. Not a single book. This is a big societal shift. We went from the bestseller list being dominated by explicitly political left-leaning books in 2020 to not a single book making the list in 2024. And these are good years to compare because they were both presidential election years. And in fact, it's even more notable because the 2024 election was way more entertaining. We had 2 attempted assassinations, a palace coup, and many notable people switching parties, like Dick Cheney becoming a Democrat and Tulsi Gabbard becoming a Republican. Despite all of that, in 2024, readers preferred to read fiction by Colleen Hoover rather than nonfiction by an Obama or an Obama ally. The few political books that were able to make the list were either by Trump allies or Trump family members. If you were following the Amazon bestseller lists rather than the polls, you would not have been as surprised that Trump won the popular vote in 2024. Now, let's talk about what stepping to the right actually means. Stepping to the right means that previously politically active leftists have moved into the please don't talk to me about politics category. In fact, some of them are typing please don't talk to me about politics into the comments of this video right now. Some people who were in the please don't talk to me about politics category have moved into right-leaning political activism. So here's my prediction. I predict that while society is moving back to the right, the bigger shift is away from politics altogether. Network news ratings are collapsing as Americans are paying less attention to politics. We went through a phase where everyone was following politics really carefully, and I think that phase is coming to an end. The 2025 list, which is admittedly only a few days old, doesn't have a single political book anywhere in the top 100. There are 8 Bible books in the top 50, though, and several books related to witchcraft and Stoicism, which brings us to our next trend, a rise in religious book sales. Readers are shifting their reading away from politics and to religion. Bible sales rose 40% in 2024. Religious books from all kinds of religions appear to be on the rise. For example, there's a revival going on right now in the Catholic and Orthodox churches. Young Gen Z men are increasing church attendance. In fact, Gen Z is the first generation in centuries where male church attendance is higher than female church attendance. But the kind of churches that these young men are flooding to is very interesting. And it will tell you a bit about where readers are headed in their preferences. These young men are opting for traditional Catholic and traditional Orthodox churches rather than the rock concert style megachurches that their millennial and Gen X parents preferred. Young men have a growing longing for tradition and are flocking to the churches with deep traditional pedigrees. So Latin Mass Catholic services are growing faster than services in English. To understand this trend, let's go back to the 1970s, where there was a big split in many of the Christian churches, where the fundamentalists often left their mainline denominations and started new denominations, new churches that embraced a modern style of church and a modern liturgy, but also a conservative theology. So these new modern services had a liturgy consisting of a concert, announcements, and then a TEDx-style sermon. The concert TED Talk combo is not what church looked like 300 years ago, 600 years ago, or 1800 years ago. While modern in style, these churches were conservative in theology, upholding all of the ancient creeds and upholding a kind of old school view of scripture and inerrancy and the role of the church, etc. Meanwhile, many mainline Protestant churches, while they had a traditional style, embraced a liberal theology. So in 2024, now fast forwarding, what's growing are churches that are both traditional in style and conservative in theology. The biggest itinerant evangelist right now is Jordan Peterson, who travels and speaks to hundreds of thousands of young men who flock to his events in city after city all around the world. And many of these young men leave his events and then start attending traditional churches as they strive to put their lives in order. And here's the crazy part. Jordan Peterson isn't a Christian. These are strange times. So I predict this trend will continue. But I suspect that this growth in religious interest may skip over the Protestant and evangelical churches. Big Eva is poorly positioned to navigate culture's rightward shift, and its embrace of modernity is a core value, and it's very modern in style, and I think it'll be hard for it to shift back. And mainline Protestant churches are rapidly moving to the left, and they're entirely out of sync with this new right-facing zeitgeist. And they're often a bit bewildered why they're having such a hard time attracting young people, and particularly young men. Speaking of which, that leads us to our next trend, which is the zeitgeist is shifting into a fourth turning. Culture and society more generally go through a big shift every 20 years or so. And these shifts can be traced back through hundreds and hundreds of years of history. And we started shifting into a fourth turning in the late 2023 and early 2024. I have an entire episode on this if you want to learn more about the fourth turning and the changing zeitgeist. But a quick summary is that girl bosses and anti-heroes are on the way out, and strong male heroes and moral clarity are on the way in. Our episode, How to Write Novels That Men Want to Read, has already become our most popular YouTube video of all time. And this is despite being only 3 months old. It got hundreds of comments on YouTube and either hundreds or thousands of comments throughout the rest of social media. And there was a lot of commentary on it, and I do want to make one point of clarification on that episode. Writing for men often attracts women as well. One of the most common comments on that video was, "I'm a woman and I also like this kind of fiction." And this is true. If you write for men, you typically get both men and women. If you write for women, you typically only attract female readers. For example, more women went to go see Deadpool and Wolverine, which is a superhero film targeted at men, starring men, than went to see The Marvels, which was a superhero film targeted at women and starring women. Similarly, a greater percentage of women voted for Joe Biden than for Kamala Harris. And Biden's campaign targeted both men and women equally, while Kamala's campaign focused primarily on women. So our episode on the fourth turning is now our fourth most popular YouTube video of all time. And I do encourage you to listen to that to understand how culture is shifting. And I predict that the trend into the fourth turning zeitgeist will accelerate. The result of this shift is that many authors who were doing well a couple of years ago will start struggling to sell books. And this drop of sales will feel inexplicable because the quality of their newer works is as high or higher than ever. And yet their new books are failing to sell like their old books sold. The authors who fail to adapt to the zeitgeist will be replaced by younger, newer, more culturally resonant authors. This is a tale as old as time. Parents are replaced by their children as one generation replaces another. So look for a lot of generational turnover at the top of the rankings this year. A change in cultural seasons really favors newer authors over incumbents. And it's not just about being young, it's primarily about understanding the zeitgeist. And so please listen to my episode about zeitgeist, especially if you don't know what the word zeitgeist is. All right. Any talk about predictions is incomplete without talking about AI. So let's talk about the irresistible AI infiltration of publishing. So AI had an amazing year in 2024. If you're an AI company, all of the charts are up and to the right. Quality is up, usage is up, acceptance is up, and costs are up. The attempt to stem the tide of AI in publishing has been anemic at best. When your best defense against something is an honor system where authors self-report AI usage, you are going to fail. Most authors now use AI-powered spell checkers, and the AI tools now come default in most new computers. Most authors have already been using AI tools, whether they realize it or not. And so an honor system doesn't stop bad actors, and it doesn't stop authors who are ignorant as to what is powering their grammar checker. So as someone who spent decades pushing back against various societal trends, I can tell you that whining is not a winning strategy. Interestingly, the pushback against AI has come from progressive literary types, and these folks have very little experience resisting technological progress. Many of them have a worldview that all progress is good, and they are ill-equipped to halt the progress of AI. Their court cases are failing, as are their technical tools for detecting AI. The good news is that AI will not destroy as many jobs as these people fear. In fact, if history of technological progress is any guide, AI will add more jobs to the economy than it subtracts. While it may not save your specific job, it will create a new job or two somewhere else in the economy. And I can go into the long history of this, of technological innovation and its effect on jobs. If y'all are curious, we can talk about it in a patrons-only Q&A. I predict the biggest limitation on AI will not come from whining, self-reporting, social shaming, regulations, court cases, or Congress. It will come from economics. Right now, the only company making profit from AI is NVIDIA. They're the company that make the chips that go into the computers that power the server farms that give you cloud-based tools like OpenAI. As companies higher in the tech stack, like Microsoft and OpenAI, shift from a growth at all costs model to a slower, more sustainable growth model, look for AI tools to become more expensive. And as costs go up, growth will slow. So as companies shift from growth seeking to profit seeking, the AI bubble will burst. Now, I'm not saying the bubble will burst this year, but every major technology like this has led to an overinvestment and a burst bubble. That happened with the railroads, it happened with sailing ships, it happened with the dot-com crash, and I suspect it will happen with AI. For the record, I doubt the crash will come in 2025, though. I think AI has at least one more year of exuberant growth in it. But corporate America has invested over $1 trillion in AI, and they will seek a return on that investment at some point. And there will be consequences because all of corporate America tends to step together. I also think we will see the very beginnings of serious on-device AI processing. I expect the new Apple M5 chips, which have not yet been announced, I'm expecting them to be able to run a decent-sized LLM on-device without having to rely on cloud computing. So expect Apple to double down on their Apple Intelligence AI renaming for all of their marketing in their 2025 lineup of computers. Speaking of AI, for our final predictions, I asked GPT-4o for New Year's predictions for book publishing in 2025. So I'll share those predictions, and then I will share my take of what I think of ChatGPT's prediction.
I predict a surge in direct-to-consumer sales. Authors and publishers will double down on direct-to-consumer models. Platforms like Substack, author websites, and Patreon will become key hubs for exclusive content, early releases, and fan engagement. This will help authors capture more revenue and build closer connections with readers.
I agree with this prediction. This trend has been growing for years, and selling direct gets easier every year, and readers become more willing to buy direct from authors every year. So I think GPT got this one right.
I predict AI and personalized content will expand. AI tools for writing, editing, and marketing will become mainstream. While AI-generated novels will still raise debates, AI will increasingly assist with world building, outlining, and content personalization, such as bonus scenes tailored to individual readers.
I agree that AI use will expand, but I don't think that AI use will become fully mainstream in 2025. No chance. There's still far too many people who find AI very unsettling.
I predict audiobook and full cast productions will boom. Audiobooks, especially full cast productions, will continue growing. Readers love immersive experiences, and the trend towards storytelling as cinema for your ears will push indie authors to invest in high-quality narration and dramatization.
I agree. I think we'll see an expansion of AI narration on the low end, and we'll also see full cast audio productions on the high end. So the single audiobook narrator is going to get squeezed from both sides, both above and below, in 2025.
I predict serialized fiction will dominate digital spaces. Platforms like Kindle Vella, Webtoon, and Radish will see an uptick in both indie and traditional publishers experimenting with serialized fiction. This format's accessibility, especially on mobile, is attracting younger readers who consume stories in bite-sized formats.
Kindle Vella doesn't exist anymore, but I do agree that we'll see an overall growth in serialized storytelling, especially on royalroad.com. And I have an entire episode on this in the works.
I predict shorter novels will gain popularity. With busy schedules and shorter attention spans, many readers prefer fast-paced, digestible reads. The resurgence of the novella format and shorter series installments, e.g., 250 pages, will continue to rise, particularly in genres like fantasy, romance, and sci-fi.
I disagree. And I also disagree that attention spans are shrinking. I haven't seen any evidence to this effect. People binge Netflix and TikTok for far more hours than they ever binged TV back in the 1990s. The number one book on the Amazon charts last week was over 1,300 pages. The second best-selling book was 643 pages. I think people, if they're bored, they'll switch, but attention spans are very long, and it's very possible to attract readers to a very long book.
I predict nostalgia and 90s, 2000s IP revivals. There will be a wave of nostalgia publishing, with new adaptations, sequels, and spin-offs of beloved 90s, 2000s IP. Expect expanded universes for fantasy and sci-fi sagas, as well as new editions and anniversary releases.
I disagree with this in publishing, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do see this in film and TV.
I predict social media platform shifts for book promotion. TikTok's influence on book talk remains strong, but new players like YouTube Shorts or unexpected competitors may steal attention. More authors will experiment with long-form video content. Think behind-the-scenes deep dives on their creative process.
I don't think we're going to see a rise in authors making long-form behind-the-scenes videos. I think that'll be about as popular as last year. Now, when it comes to TikTok, it all depends on if it survives a court challenge. If it does, it will continue to have influence. Otherwise, that influence will rapidly erode and people will shift to Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, and I have no idea how the court will rule.
I predict a rise of cozy fantasy and comfort reads. The popularity of cozy fantasy, like Legends and Lattes, will grow as readers seek escapist, heartwarming stories in uncertain times. This will spill into sci-fi as well, where hopeful, uplifting futures will counterbalance dystopian tropes.
I agree 100%. In fact, this makes me wonder if OpenAI trained on my Zeitgeist episode. So for more as to why this more optimistic, cozier type fiction will appeal in the future, do listen to my Zeitgeist episode that I keep talking about. I think you'll really like it.
I predict genre crossovers and experimental hybrids. Books that blend genres, e.g. fantasy, mystery, romance, or horror sci-fi, will increase as readers crave fresh storytelling. Blurred lines between literary and commercial will create more crossover hits, with high-concept fantasy series finding spots on mainstream bestseller lists.
I disagree. There's a lot of AI word salad here, but I don't think we're going to see another hybrid genre take off like we did in the last couple of years with Romantasy, and I don't think literary fiction is going to invade the commercial fiction space in any meaningful way.
I predict AI in publishing operations. Publishers will use AI for market analysis, cover design, and rights negotiations. While this will increase efficiency, it may lead to more scrutiny from unions and creatives about preserving human artistry in books.
I agree that publishers are going to use AI more and more behind the scenes, although I suspect a lot of them are doing this already. They're just doing it quietly. So look for them to be more open about how they use AI in operations in 2025.
I predict a growing focus on IP adaptability. Publishers will increasingly evaluate a manuscript's adaptability potential for TV, film, and gaming as a core selling point. Expect more multi-platform deals as streaming services hunt for book franchises with built-in audiences.
I don't think this is a big change. Publishers have long looked at IP adaptability, and that will continue. If anything, this will decline as streaming services spend less money making new shows, and as big crossover IPs like Concord fail so spectacularly. So I don't think this is going to be a big trend in 2025.
I predict crowdfunding for special editions, pre-order campaigns, and unique collector's items will rise. Authors with dedicated fan bases will lean into platforms like Kickstarter to fund special projects and limited-run books, turning fans into investors.
I agree. I've been pushing for Kickstarter and crowdfunding for over a decade, and it's finally taking off. Every year, more and more authors find out about it and learn how to use it, which makes me very happy.
I predict community-driven book launches. Book launches will evolve into multi-day virtual and in-person events that blend panels, Q&As, and interactive experiences. With your debut novel coming soon, your launch party could align perfectly with this trend if you add reader polls, exclusive swag, and interactive activities.
This prediction is meaningless AI word salad. It's all buzzwords and no substance. And this is actually a great way to end GPT's predictions with a reminder that AI still sometimes is just garbage. So sometimes it can be quite good and sometimes it's really not. There's no fully replacing humans in the loop as to offering judgment and greater perspective. Sure, humans can throw in a bunch of buzzwords too, but you probably notice you're tuning out a little bit, not paying quite as much attention during that last AI answer. That's a classic example of AI word salad. Overall, I'm optimistic about the future. I think 2025 is going to be a really good year for authors. It's going to be a really good year for publishing. I think the changes that we're seeing in the industry, particularly regarding indie authors and how they're going to be getting treated better by traditional publishers, I think those are really good changes. As an audiobook listener, I'm really excited about the full voiced cast becoming a more popular way of doing audiobooks. And overall, I think the changes are going to be positive, but I don't think we're going to see many major changes this year. I think mostly we're going to see the trends from last year continuing. The big shift this year is what I keep harping on, which is the Zeitgeist. So the kind of books that readers want is changing. But in terms of the industry, in terms of AI, I don't think we're going to see any major changes other than what we saw last year, just more so. And I really do encourage you to listen to that Zeitgeist episode if you haven't already. A special thank you to our new patrons who started supporting the podcast in the month of December. That is Lori Prince, Corby Pons, Deus, Mitch Todd, Lynette Smith, James, Suzanne Delzo, Jim, Tiffany Felix, Kevin, Mike Dowling, and Lee Ross. Thank you so much for your support. You help keep this podcast on the air. These episodes are a lot of work, and I appreciate you helping to offset the cost of producing these episodes. The Novel Marketing Podcast is a production of authormedia.com. You can find the blog version of this episode, including links to a lot of the things I talked about today. You can find that at authormedia.com/444. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend. That really helps out the podcast. I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr. saying thank you for listening and live long and prosper.